Men's suicide has been a common theme of all the past debates on International Men's Day, and rightly so. As has been said, suicide rates amongst men are 3 times higher than for women in the UK. The connection between relationship breakdown and suicide risk in Western countries has been studied, and I believe that the data from these studies indicates that, unsurprisingly, relationship breakdown elevates suicide risk in both sexes, and more so for men. None of the studies apparently investigated the specific effect on the likelihood of suicide following father separation from their children, despite charities reporting that this is the overwhelming source of that distress. It is quite clear to me that we need to do a lot more to ensure fathers are not stopped from seeing their children to save lives, and in these COVID lockdown times it's too easy to imagine how this will be causing even more mental health problems and, very unfortunately, more suicides.
This video is part of a series where I fact-check a number of claims that Laura Bates has made about men, boys, women, and the men's human rights movement in her book, Men Who Hate Women. And in this video, I'm going to examine some of the claims she has made about the English MP Philip Davies, who since 2005 has represented the interests of the people of Shipley, West Yorkshire, in the UK Parliament. And I want to begin by shining a spotlight on one of the book's most obvious examples of the mendacious and often childlike manner that Laura Bates chooses to smear people whose politics she doesn't like. Bates rather dramatically accuses Philip Davies of spearheading the penetration of manosphere ideology into the halls of government, and proposes that examples of such penetration include the fact that the Conservative MP has repeatedly voted against measures to tackle violence against women and girls, and even once tabled a private member's bill attempting to repeal the Sex Discrimination Act. For the uninitiated, the Sex Discrimination Act, or more specifically the Sex Discrimination Act of 1975, was an act of Parliament that protected both men and women from discrimination on the grounds of their sex, or indeed marital status. It was a landmark piece of legislation which both rendered sex discrimination illegal in law in Great Britain, and also included significant measures aimed at working towards the elimination of such discrimination, as well as positive action to promote equality of opportunity between men and women generally. Whereas the Sex Discrimination Election Candidates Act 2002, the specific piece of legislation Mr. Davies attempted to repeal, was a considerably narrower and much more time-limited Act of Parliament, the purpose of which was to allow the Labour Party, and any other political party so inclined, to undertake certain acts of direct sex discrimination previously made illegal by the aforementioned Sex Discrimination Act 1975. Essentially allowing them to continue the then illegal and supposedly one-off practice of women-only shortlists that had been introduced into the Labour Party by Tony Blair. In actual fact, and if we want to be entirely accurate about the matter, it was none other than the current Mother of the House, Labour's Harriet Harman, who eventually repealed both acts. Although it would be ever so slightly sly and misleading for me to state that fact, without also acknowledging that she replaced them with the Equality Act 2010. So in other words, more plain and simply, much like the party he is a member of, who hold a majority in the Houses of Parliament, Philip Davies does not support the act of direct sex discrimination required to progress women-only shortlists. Meanwhile, the claim that Philip Davies has repeatedly voted against measures to tackle violence against women and girls clearly invites the reader to conclude that, for some twisted reason, Shipley's MP is against measures designed to tackle violence against women and girls, and worse still, has made repeated attempts to block them. Language matters, and feminists have repeatedly used such exacting, fallacious language against the 5 times democratically elected member when seeking to unseat him, or at the very least, shut him up.
Philip Davies talks about equality in terms that really make it very difficult to achieve. He's a proponent of the idea that you achieve equality by treating everybody exactly the same.
London-based Sophie Walker and the Women's Equality Party used exactly the same tactic when they stood against him in the 2017 general election.
And what do you think about Mr Davies?
Absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
We love him to pieces.
Yeah.
He makes common sense, and we're going to vote for him.
The Women's Equality Party, their leader, has decided to stand against Mr Davies because they think he's anti-women.
Absolutely not. Rubbish.
No, rubbish.
Absolute rubbish.
So what do you think?
I can't even say anything more than that. That what you're asking me is rubbish.
And in the run-up to their campaign that would eventually see them lose their deposit, Laura Bates rather helpfully used her position as a columnist for a national newspaper to pose the question, is Philip Davies fit to be an MP? And to accuse him of abusing his position as a democratically elected member of parliament by opposing measures to tackle domestic and sexual violence. On that occasion, she was specifically referring to a debate about language in Parliament, which ironically actually helps to highlight the hilarious hypocrisy to be discovered lurking in the Oxbridge-educated author's very carefully crafted words.
Mr. Speaker, language matters. The use of the term honour to describe a violent criminal act committed against a man, but more often a woman, can only be explained as a means of self-justification for the perpetrator. It diminishes the victim and provides a convenient excuse for what in our society we should accurately call simply murder, rape, abuse and enslavement. Mr. Speaker, I want us in this House to send a clear message that the excuses end here.
The debate involved the matter of gendered language, which is something that does very often vex feminists like Laura Bates. For example, a recognition of the potential negative implications of gendered language is the reason why we now call people who carry people out of burning buildings firefighters and not firemen. On this occasion, Conservative MP Nusrat Ghani was seeking to introduce legislation which would end the use of the term honour crime in official government publications. When introducing her private member's bill, Ghani argued the principle that language matters, and that the use of the term honour to describe a violent criminal act committed against a man, but more often a woman, can only be explained as self-justification for the perpetrator because it diminishes the victim and provides a convenient excuse for what in our society we should accurately call, very simply, murder, rape, abuse and enslavement. Even more than that, the term assumes violence, particularly against women, is culturally sensitive, a sensitivity which allows the perpetrator to further coerce the victim from seeking help and intimidates the agencies of the state from prosecuting these violent crimes. She concluded by noting that we have to make sure every victim is supported and no political correctness or assumptions are made about a victim's background, which means that they cannot get equal support, respect and dignity when they come forward. Incredibly, after saying all that, and despite the fact that it is understood that at the very least 1 in 5 victims of so-called honour crimes are male, Ghani went on to name her bill the Crime, Aggravated Murder of and Violence Against Women Bill. And it was very simply the gendered language and the entirely unnecessary diminution of the minority population of male victims that Philip Davies took issue with. As he sadly pointed out at the time, it appeared that he was the only one MP prepared to speak for victims of honour-based violence who are male. Such, it seems, are the cultural sensitivities in Parliament when the words violence against women and girls are invoked.
Good afternoon, Mr Davies.
No, Mr. Crick.
Are you anti-women?
No, don't be ridiculous.
Your opponents seem to think you're a bit of a misogynist.
Well, they're wrong, aren't they?
Why did you try and talk out Nusrat Ghani's bill on honour killings?
I didn't talk out Ghani's bill on honour killings. It was a 10-minute rule bill. It's impossible to talk out a bill on honour killings when it's a 10-minute rule bill. But I thought that the bill should apply to men as well as women. And Nusrat Ghani, I think, and now agrees with me that it should apply to male victims as well as female victims.
You also voted against the Istanbul Convention, didn't you?
Yes, because it should apply to... if you're a victim of violence, it shouldn't matter whether you're a man or a woman. It shouldn't matter whether the perpetrator's a man or a woman.
This was specifically about violence which is against women because they are women.
No, it was about all violence against women. Again, do your research, read the bill, Michael. You're usually good at these things. You're losing your touch here.
I was always being told that women were being discriminated against when it came to our justice system. Yet all the anecdotal evidence suggested that this was wrong. I used to hear it in the House of Commons all the time. I used to hear that women were treated very badly in the criminal justice system. And I actually wanted to find out the facts because I thought that that was an outrage too, that they shouldn't be treated worse in the criminal justice system. And I, setting out to find the truth and getting the information from the House of Commons library, I've now amassed so much evidence to show that it's men who are being discriminated against that it's unbelievable that anyone could still be claiming otherwise. But they do.
Davies's pioneering efforts to acknowledge and address well-known male inequalities in Parliament, which have included establishing the now annual debate on International Men's Day, have very much got under many feminists' skin. And indeed, Bates's 2017 hit piece wasn't the first time that The Guardian championed efforts to silence and punish the MP. The previous autumn, fellow feminist and Guardian columnist Ellie Mae O'Hagan orchestrated an apparently organic dogpile on Twitter by confusingly encouraging women to send Philip Davies pictures of them having and eating cake. This immediately followed Guardian Home Affairs correspondent Jamie Grierson's apparently exclusive scoop that months earlier Davies had made a speech at a conference on men's issues. The bulk of the speech involved highlighting Home Office data that showed how the criminal justice system punishes men more harshly than women when they commit the same type of crime.
Something that has also caused me great concern is the fact that women involved in offences involving cruelty to children or the neglect of children have been able to avoid prison in some cases using the fact that they have primary caring responsibilities for their children as an excuse. How on earth can that possibly be right? More women than men benefit from this get out of jail free card, and yet more women are convicted of offences against children. In fact, 40% more in the latest year. Yet, you've guessed it, they are less likely to be sent to prison for exactly the same offence. The custody rate for child cruelty or neglect is in fact 33% for men and just 15% for women.
He also suggested that women are treated more favourably in the family courts.
Family courts. It's quite clear that the courts are more likely to place children with the mother over the father. This is certainly a massive area where men face very different treatment to women. I really do think people underestimate the effect on fathers of having to battle to see their children and facing the inevitable likelihood that they will come off worse simply because of their sex. I'm certainly not saying that all cases are like this. Reasonable mothers will surely allow the father as much access to his children as possible if she had custody and they were not a threat to them. But life isn't always as simple as that. Many women use their children as a stick to beat the father with, either because they are bitter about the failed relationship, for financial reasons, or because they've moved on and it's easier for them if their new partner takes on the role of father to their children.
But worse still, he was alleged to have committed a cardinal sin by proposing that some feminist zealots want to have their cake and eat it by promoting an equality but only when it suits agenda. Within hours, Jeremy Corbyn, then leader of the Labour Party, was quoted as describing such views as deeply sexist, and Sophie Walker, then leader of the Women's Equality Party, pitched in with an article where she confusingly both condemned Davies's comments and also publicly and proudly self-identified as a feminist zealot. All of which meant that by dinner time the same day, Jamie Grierson happily found himself in the position to update his own exclusive and propose that pressure was now mounting on the Prime Minister to suspend the MP for his sexist comments. Theresa May, then leader of the Conservative Party, declined to oblige. Despite such obvious metropolitan media mischief, elsewhere in her book, Bates has the goal to shamelessly criticise major media outlets such as the BBC for not challenging Philip Davis's claim that 1 in 3 victims of domestic abuse are male. On this point, Bates accuses Davies of employing another common MRA tactic of promoting false and misleading statistics. And yet, elsewhere in her book, she uses the exact same ONS annual data trends, highlighted by the Conservative MP, to support her own argument about the scale of domestic abuse in England and Wales. Speaking of the BBC, one matter noticeably absent from Laura Bates' list of carefully crafted complaints is the allegation that Philip Davies once assaulted and physically intimidated a BBC employee who was simply trying to do her job.
Right, you ready? It's going to be a very cool artistic move. No, I need you to look over there. Very professional, ready for work.
In March 2018, feminist comedian Louisa Omelan took to social media to make the extraordinary claim that the Shipley MP had shoved her and slammed his office door to stop her leaving during an interview for her BBC show Politics for Bitches.
And I ran out, and then he held the door in front of me. He wouldn't let me open the door. Like, he wouldn't let me open the door, so he closed the door on me so I couldn't get out. And I was like, get the fucking way, you dickhead. And I shouldn't have called him a dickhead, but he blocked me in, like he blocked me in his office. And then he was like, are you from the BBC? Are you from the BBC? This is for the BBC. I said, this is for Louise Romulan. Fuck off. And I ran out the fire exit. So this is Philip Davies, an MP, who's just called me names, made me feel this big.
Fellow BBC comedians quickly jumped to her support, with cake aficionado Sue Perkins accusing Davies of common assault, and incredibly, Sir Lenny Henry even suggested that he should have been settled down with a 2x4 plank of wood. Labour MP Stella Creasy offered to fast-track Louisa's grievance through the Commons complaint process, but no such complaint was ever submitted. And Amelian's aforementioned celebrity supporters fell silent when it subsequently transpired that she had rather childishly made the whole thing up after an attempted gotcha-style interview had backfired. Furthermore, witnesses present then reported that the BBC comedian herself had in fact assaulted Davies's female assistant by hitting her with a camera during the commotion.
And he said, give me the camera thingy. And I said, no. I said, I'm not giving you the camera. He said, give me the camera, film camera. So I stole the camera out of my director's hand and I ran out the building with it. I just ran out the building with it. I accidentally hit the girl on the way out, which I'm really sorry for. I hit her with a camera.
No wonder Laura opted not to touch that particular tale with a barge pole, or perhaps more fittingly with a 2x4 plank of wood. Then again, so much for sisterly solidarity when it comes to calling out violence against women simply for trying to do their jobs.
Can't you see it too? There's an elephant in the room.
The Glass Blind Spot is brought to you by you, because it's your views, your likes and your comments that keep this show on the road.